Second language acquisition. The definition of second language acquisition is a learning language which is spoken in the community generally after acquiring the first language. There is a major distinction between acquisition and learning. Term acquisition is used to describe situation to the language gradual development by using language naturally in communicative situation with others who knows the language. In contrast, term learning is a process accumulating knowledge of the feature of language with more conscious situation. Typically, this term exists in institutional settings such as school and universities. If we are talking about the acquisition barrier, we will also talk about the factors that makes acquisition process is very difficult to conduct. The most common in acquiring second language acquisition is the different characteristic of language than the first language, which makes acquisition is more difficult. Second, the second language is mostly encountered at the teenager age. The language is less focused because the major activities and less used in the community rather than the first language. Usually, it is because the critical period in learning language has already passed in teenager. Now, let us talk about the second language acquisition learning methods. There are three second language acquisition learning methods. The first is grammar translation method, audiolingual method, and communicative approach. The first is grammar translation method. This is the most traditional way to learn second language acquisition. The system used vocabulary list and set of grammar rules to define the target of learning. The learning also emphasized memorization and written language. However, spoken language are less emphasized than written language with this method. The next is audiolingual method. This method are very contrast with the grammar translation method because the learner are more emphasizing the spoken language. Students had to repeat the drills of the language learning, moving from simple to complex systematic presentation of the structure of the second language. The system was strongly influenced by belief that the fluent use of a language was essentially a set of habits that could be developed with a lot of practice. The next is communicative approach. This is the most specific way to learn second language. The method is emphasizing on belief that what the language was function in specific ways of language than the form of the language itself or the basic feature of the language. For example, English for business or English for medical personnel. Now, we are going to discuss about a main problem on the learners. There are changes in recent years about the teachers' concern for their learners. One of them is the error toleration. Traditionally, error were considered as a negative behavior and must be avoided. The recent acceptance such as error in learners' fundamental shift in perspective from the more traditional view of how second language learning takes place. The first possible error is on the transfer. This is also called as a cross-linguistic influence. Transfer means using sound and expression in the first language when using in the second language. If the first and second language have similar features, then the learner may be able to benefit from the positive transfer of the first language to the second language. However, if the first and second language has different features, the result of the transfer may be difficult and it is called the negative transfer. The negative transfer usually called as interference. The second problem is the interlanguage. On close inspection, the language produced by second language learner contains a large number of errors that seem to have no connection of the forms of either the first or the second language. Or we can say that interlanguage is a system that first and second language has different rules but contains some similar aspect in the first and second language. For the example, the Spanish first language speaker says, "His name is Marco." It is producing a form that is not used by adult speaker of English, does not occur in English first language acquisition by children, and is not based on the structure in Spanish. Another problem in acquiring second language acquisition is motivation. There are several factors that combine in the profile of a successful second learner. Obviously, the motivation to learn is very important. The first is instrumental motivation. That is, they want to learn the second language in order to achieve some other goals such as completing the school graduation requirement or being able to read specific scientific publication, but not really for any social purposes. The second is integrative motivation. That is, they want to learn the second language for social purposes in order to take part in social life of community using that language and to become an accepted member of that community. Input and output. The term input is used as in first language acquisition to describe the language that the learner is exposed to. To be beneficial for second language learning, that input has to be comprehensible because we can't process what we don't understand. Input can be made comprehensible by being simple in structure and vocabulary, as in varieties of speech called foreign talk. For example, how are you getting on in your studies? It will be simple if we just say, the English class, do you like it? As the learner's interlanguage develops, however, there is a need for more interaction and the kind of negotiated input that arises in conversation. Negotiated input is second language material that the learner can acquire in interaction through requests for clarification while active attention is being focused on what is said. For example, as you can see on the below, the conversation between non-native speaker and the native speaker are negotiating the meaning together. In this type of interaction, the learner experiences the benefit of both receiving input, hearing the second language, and producing output, speaking the second language. The opportunity to produce comprehensible output in meaningful interaction seems to be another important element in learners' development of second language ability, yet it is one of the most difficult things to provide in large second language classes. One solution has been to create different types of tasks and activities in which learners have to interact with each other, usually in small group of pairs, to exchange information or solve problems. Then we move to the last presentation, that is communicative competence. Communicative competence can be defined as the general ability to use language accurately, appropriately, and flexibly. The first component is grammatical competence, which involves the accurate use of words and structures.